Now, the global financial architecture has failed to resolve the needs of the African continent. This has become one of the rallying calls from the African leaders on the global scene. But as the African Development Bank annual meetings start at the Kenyatta International Convention Center here in Nairobi, what are some of the solutions that the continent is proposing for a more inclusive global financial architecture? Here's Jimmy Mbogo with some of the issues raised by African countries on why the reforms couldn't come sooner.
The Africa Development Bank President Akiwumi Adesina has highlighted several issues that African countries want addressed in the global financial architecture to better suit the needs of the continent. President Adesina, who is in Kenya for the 59th annual AfDB meeting, noted that the continent was left out in the formation of the global financial architecture, an issue that has continued to play out in the slow turnaround time that Bretton Woods institutions take to resolve African issues.
So what you find African countries asking for is a speedier implementation and execution of those global mechanisms to deal with the issue of debt. I don't believe that Africa should have a bowl in its hands and going around begging for food. No, there is no dignity at all in begging for food. What Africa has, with the potential it has, it must have bowls in its hand with seeds in it and plant the seeds by itself.
Further, African countries such as Kenya continue to pay a higher interest on their credit facility, an issue that the AfDB president now says has been occasioned by unfair risk assessment. However, he is calling for more prudent use of the available facility, even as he attributed the high debt ratio in the continent to a rise in imported inflation occasioned by depreciation of the currencies. Like
between 2014 and 2024, where we are, maybe 19 African countries issued Eurobonds well over $200 billion. And of course, things were easy at the time. That you have low interest rates, and therefore people took advantage of that, which is fine. With also the contractionary monetary policy you have now back in the EU zone or in the US, the cost of servicing debt has gone off the roof.
To further help combat the effects of climate change, President Adesina has called on governments to employ other ways of generating revenue, such as taking advantage of facilities offered toward green financing for projects such as agriculture development, noting that close to 40% of the world's unutilized arable land is in the continent.
If we looked at it from the pipeline of KDC, we're actually looking at raising over $240 million to basically invest in environmental sustainability.
From that perspective, we are talking about not less than 5 billion shillings in terms of the funding needs. And I think as an institution, right now, we can basically talk about at least 1 billion shillings being part of the climate funding that we've been able to internally resource as an institution.
So what Africa does with agriculture is going to determine the future of food in the world.
As the 59th edition of the AfDB annual meeting commences here in Nairobi, it is the governor's resolution as well as commitment from the bank that are likely to make headlines, because this then will inform how the bank interacts with the continent for the next year. Jimmy Mbogo, Citizen TV, Nairobi.